Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Are you able to hear me
Yes, yes, yes.
and see me?
No, video is not
Hold
on,
on,
I
hold
think.
on, hold on, hold on.
You haven't got this webinar link?
No. Are you able to see me now?
One second. No.
Hold on, I'll log in again.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Uh,
My
please
camera has been disabled.
no,
Okay,
no.
so
Please join with the recent link that I have shared on WhatsApp.
yeah, okay. Let me just. Just joining again.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Are you able to see me?
Yes, yes, yes. Yes.
I am not able to see any of you, but that's okay. Yeah, now it's okay.
Hmm.
I can see you, but I don't know. Are you able to see me?
Yes, yes, yes. So let me share my screen for a while.
So, yeah, so now are you able to see me? Okay, brilliant. You will
Okay.
have to help me with the audience and the chat and those kind of things, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Brilliant. Okay. So we are set, I guess. You will have to help me move the slides, or you will have
Okay,
to, yeah,
no problem.
yeah.
Otherwise, I will log in with my phone as well.
Okay. That would be okay. Should be fine.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Now you're getting an echo because phone and both are logged in, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So now you're able to hear me, see me.
Yes, yes.
So deploying AI in regulated environments. Okay, that's the slide that you have. Okay. So the link again has been shared with everybody on LinkedIn or on mail.
No, via Microsoft Teams, the software automatically sends the link, reminder links, and all the things.
Okay. I meant to where? Where do they send it? To the emails of the registered people.
Yeah, yeah, registered email.
Okay. 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 I guess that I'm able to see this. Something happens. Anyhow, you are able to see me, others are able to see me, right? I can't see my figure here in the bottom, which is okay. I mean, as long as people can see me and hear me, that should be okay.
Yeah.
So usually you get the team view, right?
Uh, you want to see
The
the
gallery.
participants?
Yeah, is that possible? I
Yeah, there
mean,
is a
gallery view, right?
option. No, no. People's Q&A,
Yeah, for
people's, you can check.
no. I mean, in the more options, settings. No. Okay, in people. Yeah, I got it. Okay. It should be okay. I hope we get a good audience
Yeah, yeah.
Friday evening.
5 years, sir.
Hi, Viraj.
Hello. Hello,
Good to
Mr.
see
Abhay. How
you.
are you?
Good, good.
Thank you so much.
So I was just telling Dinesh, I mean, we've had a wonderful Friday evening, right? So let's hope we get a good audience.
Yep. Yeah.
Hi, Tavleen.
So we will wait for 5 minutes and then we will start.
Yeah, sure, sure. No worries. Hello, Shubham.
Take the questions at the last in the Q&A.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Perfect.
I think I'll need around 35 minutes, 35 to 40, 35 minutes. And then we can put in the questions, I guess. Hello, Kundan. Just give me a moment.
I think Dinesh, let's get started. People will join in anyways when we start. So that's the
Yeah.
usual. People will keep on joining.
Yeah. So we will start. Okay. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for all for joining and taking time for this webinar. On the behalf of Nirmiti, I am delighted to welcome you for this session, Deploying AI in Regulated Environment, What Pharma Leaders Must Know. Before we begin, let me briefly introduce Nirmiti. Nirmiti is a healthcare-focused technology and solution company specialized in healthcare AI solution, healthcare product engineering, and healthcare interoperability. We closely work with healthcare organizations, pharma companies, medtech firms to design and build scalable, compliant, and future-ready digital systems. At a core, we focus on solving real-world healthcare problems, healthcare challenges, and we are fortunate to have a good client in the healthcare industry. Okay, so now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Abhay Pansalkar. Dr. Pansalkar is a pharmaceutical physician with over 20 years of regional medical leadership across 20 countries. He continuously served as a regional medical scientific director in oncology and hematology, and he is widely recognized as a digital and AI health architect. Over his career, he held senior medical affairs and clinical development role at GSK, Cipla, also in Dr. Reddy's, leading phase 3 and phase 4 studies. Also, he specialized in turning real-world clinical data into audit-ready values narrative for healthcare networks and regulators. So thank you once again for everyone, and thank you for joining this webinar. And over to you, Dr. Abhay. Please take this session forward.
Thank you, Dinesh. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, would you share the slides?
Yeah.
So, as Dinesh shares the slides from his end, I'll take this opportunity to thank Nirmiti for this wonderful opportunity on a Friday evening to get all the uh, interested founders, developers, as well as pharma leaders and colleagues across multiple disease areas or multiple functions to this talk where AI is no longer a future question for pharma. When it is here, it's there across clinical trials, clinical safety, drug supply, medical affairs, and commercials also. The question is no longer whether to deploy AI. The question is how do you deploy it in a way that regulators, patients, and our own quality systems will trust. So today's talk will be about a practical playbook for deploying AI in a regulated pharma and healthcare environment. The focus is not generic AI. It's about how to deploy AI in a way that you can defend in front of inspectors, auditors, partners, and patients. So we'll move from the regulatory backdrop to the operating model and then into function specific use cases in the GXP environment. And then practically, what do you do in the next 3 months to set up the whole framework to deploy AI in your organizations? And what does it mean for someone who is developing these AI tools to be deployed in a regulated environment? So can we move to the next slide? Yeah. So as I said, this is the takeaway or the key slide. If somebody has to get AI into regulated pharma environment, uh, one enterprise governance model which can be applied across multiple functions is the need. Why? Because the bar is shifted. Regulators now expect a life cycle oversight for any AI application. Now, the implication is that you cannot govern all these functions with separate local rules for different AI applications. You need one operating model, one risk taxonomy, one accountable governance structure. And the next 90 days should therefore be to focus on standing governance structure, building an AI inventory. If you already have one, you'll have to go back and relook at basis the risk tiering which is happening now, and then obviously selecting some lighthouse cases, not to do a pilot. The intent is to focus on the governance so that you can refresh your SOPs and you can train the people. Now, one thing which will be common to today's talk is the draft FDA 7-step credibility framework, which will be the default decision spine for every GXP AI system. I mean, this is something that we'll discuss today, and then we'll talk about 5 priority use cases, and we'll talk about what's the outcome, what's the risk, what's the mitigation, and what's the governance that a pharma leader looks at or is wanting to look at when they decide on deploying an AI in their workflow. So if it's one message, then it's one enterprise governance model which is applied across multiple functions. So can we move to the next slide? So before that, I guess we have AI applications everywhere. So and now it's biopharma, but healthcare delivery is already there. But there are some similarities where they converge and there are some where they diverge. What I mean by that is uh, across organizations, I guess everybody many a times borrows the AI patterns from either the healthcare systems or general IT systems, and then they try to port them into pharma. And that's a big mistake because um, biopharma is more GXP driven. It manages evidence over years and decades, often under the GXP expectations, while healthcare delivery often optimizes point of care, live transactional clinical workflows. The shared principles across both sectors are, I mean, in terms of data integrity, human oversight, and traceability. But the difference is the time horizon, the regulatory consequences, and the validation burden. This is the biggest burden, I would say, when you compare healthcare versus biopharma. And the bar has significantly risen when you look at all the regulations which have just recently in the recent times come in. So yes, I mean there are similarities, but I mean they are completely different also. So pharma treats data as a sovereign asset, whereas healthcare treats data as a dynamic operational good. So two different outcomes that we are looking at, though some of the principles are common and shared. So can we move to the next one? Yeah. So the big question is, AI is moving from pilots to the GXP environment, and we know in the recent past, around more than 300 plus AI/ML submissions have been reviewed by US FDA across the drug development life cycle, um, which has led to the risk-based credibility framework, which is now expected for all the GXP impacting AIs. And also, I guess other countries, the EU AI Act has come in, and the GAMP5 have update has happened from ISP. So all these things are basically telling us one thing. It's not about can we use AI anymore. It's about can we defend our AI to a regulator, to an auditor, to a patient, and to a court. That's the biggest question that we need to answer when we are deploying AI. Can we move to the next one? So, so these are the 4 anchors. I mean, I would say when we are looking at from a regulatory perspective. So we talked about the FDA guidance, which is talking about the credibility framework. The EMA reflection paper and the AI work plan for 2028 is also coming in, which is more about human-centric life cycle approach. So remember, this is a life cycle approach more than anything else. So um, it is better to take an early scientific advice from the regulators when you're trying to build an AI which impacts the benefit risk profile for a disease in a patient in a GXP environment. So this aligns with the EU AI Act, which is the high risk classification. And the ISP GMP 5 second edition that has also been updated. So I mean, computerized system validations have come in for AIML. Agile critical thinking also replaces the checkbox validation which happens, and the data integrity is non-negotiable with Alcoa Plus framework. In fact, surprisingly, even India, with the DPDP and the CDSCO guidelines which have come in, are aligning to the ICH E6R3 and the EU AI Act, which means, I mean, even if you're developing something in India for India in a GXP setup, you need to follow all the rules and regulations which are similar in nature. I mean, if you have to ask me, life cycle validation is the key, and two is early engagement or the advice that you can take from the regulators to understand the risk tier and basis which what data needs to be generated to get an approval for an AI to be deployed. So the management implication is very clear for everybody. So every use case needs a documented context of use, risk tier, validation plan, and a monitoring plan. I'll talk about this in the next slides. Can we go to the next one? Yeah, so here, I mean, this is the backbone or the default GXP lens that needs to be kept in. I mean, even if you want to develop a solution, or even if you want to engage with a vendor who is developing a solution, or someone who is working on the solution, what FDA expects is something on this on these lines. So it prevents a common error which is happening always. I mean, teams rush in to select a model or a vendor before defining the business decision and its regulatory consequence. So remember, business decision and the regulatory consequence is the key. So the first three steps, the question of interest, the context of use, and the model risk assessment, those are very clear, and they should be answered in writing before we even take a decision to put in some money around any AI tool. And then once that risk is very clear, the next steps will logically follow: the credibility plan, the evidence package, the documentation, and the adequacy of the decision. They become much more disciplined. So model risk, also remember, is not about how sophisticated is your algorithm. It is about the influence of that model on a consequential decision. And I'll show you in the next slides what that means and how do you apply in a say, for example, a clinical development case. So the basic thing that they're asking is, what is it that the AI is supporting? What decision is it supporting? What is the this very specific context of use in terms of its scope, role, and downstream output? Also, I mean, if the context changes, the whole process changes again. So we'll have to do the whole assessment step one, two, three again, and basis which the plan will change. That's the expectation. So you will have to build a credibility plan calibrated to the risk that you identify, and then you have to engage the FDA quite early to get this whole credibility plan in place. And then it's about executing and documenting the evidence. And if you still feel that the evidence is inadequate, you will have to either reduce the influence, or you change the data, or you have to add some controls. So the model risk is the key message here in terms of how it's influencing a consequential decision, not the sophistication of the algorithm. So can we move to the next slide? So before I show you the example from a clinical development perspective, risk tiering is something that's absolutely critical now. What that means is every use case has to be classified by the model influence on the decision and the consequence of a wrong decision. So the principle here is more the model influences a consequential decision, the stronger should the validation, documentation, and human oversight burden be. So if you look at this chart or this table, uh, on the vertical axis, you will see the consequence of a wrong decision from low to high. And on the x-axis, you'll see the model influence on the decision from low to high. So if you say, for example, you take the low risk light touch quadrant. So for example, the productivity assistant, anything which helps improve the meeting notes, your internal research, productivity of your meetings, whatever. I mean, that is low risk because it's not GXP per se in that sense. So, I mean, a light touch governance is good enough. But if you go to the other end and see the high risk full validation one on which is critical, for example, the PV pharmacovigilance triage on serious adverse events, or how do you enroll patients or trial enrollment gating, or if there is a manufacturing deviation happening in a batch. So those decisions are critical and they are high risk. And whatever applications are being developed on around these kind of high risk cases, you need a full validation. So if there is something which is, say, for example, you're engaging a KOL or you're mapping a KOL, or you are getting some insights which are through an AI tool from the MSLs who are there in the field. So the risk is medium, and it can always be managed or changed or I mean adapted over a period of time. So it's not something which is very high risk. So you need a targeted validation because it's a medium risk. So the biggest thing that I mean, take away from the slide is, I mean, you have to use this risk tiering matrix and basis the model influence on the decision and the consequence of a wrong decision. Everything else follows logically. So the next slide. Yeah, so this is an example. Now, if you look at what this talks about, it's from the FDA draft guidance. Basically, it's talking about a clinical scenario. So there's a drug which is associated with a life-threatening drug-related adverse reaction. So in the previous trials of this drug, all patients underwent a 24-hour inpatient hospital monitoring after the dosing. Now they want to do a new study. The sponsor proposes that we'll use an AI model to identify which patients may be considered low risk and they could move to outpatient monitoring after dosing instead of inpatient monitoring. And that the tool will use the baseline patient characteristics and the lab values to uh, move the patients in these two situations. So either if it's low risk versus high risk. Now, if you look at how I would go ahead with this, what's the specific decision that the AI supports is which participants can be considered low risk but do not need inpatient monitoring. So it's a very specific question that we are asking. And then what's the context of use? This is very important because what is the AI doing? It's predicting the adverse reaction risk and it's using the baseline characteristics and lab values, and then it stratifies patients into low and high risk monitoring groups. So this context of use is very narrow, very specific. So any AI which is tool which is going to be used in such a GXP environment has to have a narrow context of use and very specific question of interest. Now, when we look at the model risk, what's the risk? The risk is, I mean, it's a high influence and a high consequence. Why? Because one, the AI is the only determinant of the monitoring that needs to happen or the classification that needs to happen. There's no other way to stratify patients into low risk and high risk. Also, I guess if the model incorrectly labels a patient as a low risk, the patient would or the participant would end up as an outpatient monitoring. They may not receive proper treatment for a life-threatening adverse reaction. So in this situation, the AI tool becomes a high risk and so it needs a very strong validation. So then the credibility plan follows accordingly. So you have to describe the model inputs, outputs, what's the architecture, what's the development data, what's the training methods that have been used, and obviously how the evaluation method and the acceptance criteria proportionate to this high risk. And then the execution which happens is you will have to run the training, tuning, testing, and the workflow evaluation, and then the credibility assessment reports, and then you have to explain any deviation from this plan. Now, if you think that the credibility is insufficient, you will have to add additional layers of evidence, or you have to reduce the model influence. So the scope changes, the context of use changes, the risk changes, and then so the credibility plan can continue. So the message is very clear. So in a regulated GXP environment, I guess uh, defining those steps one, two, and three become very critical so that the next steps four, five, six, and seven can follow logically. Next one. Yeah. So for the organizations, I guess you have to keep these five non-negotiable principles for AI and you have to standardize it. What it means is you need an accountable human oversight. When we say human in loop by design, it's about accountability and nothing else. I mean, there needs to be an accountable human oversight. Life cycle validation, it's not just the launch validation, it's life cycle validation, and also you have to plan for the data drift which is going to happen. The revalidation triggers have to be very clearly defined. The model retraining triggers have to be defined, and the revalidation gates have to be defined, because the validation is for life cycle and not just for launch. Obviously, data integrity is the key with Alcoa. The data has to be attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, accurate, plus it also has to be complete, consistent, enduring, and available. So this has to be applied to the training data, the inputs and the outputs. That's the expectation. And the explainability, which is proportional to the risk. So it does not mean that opening every neutral weight, but it must be proportionate to the risk that we are having for the context of use. So, and the last one, which is the privacy, sovereignty, and ethics. We all know GDPR, HIPAA, and India's TPTP. You have to minimize uh, the privacy errors. You will have to prefer a federated learning. You will have to also do a fairness testing and document bias. So privacy and ethics also become mandatory. These are non-negotiable principles for the AI in GP. These are the principles of trust that nothing else will be able to replace for your AI tool that you're going to bring or deploy in the GXP environment. Next slide. Yeah, so if you now have a clear idea about the context of use, the risk tiering, and the evidence of the credibility plans, how do you deploy this? So the framework to deploy it uh, is super critical. And when we look at the value and use case selection, you will have to tie each AI tool to a measurable business or scientific outcome in terms of, say, a cycle time or a deviation rate or a submission quality. The time for vanity pilots is done. You'll have to reject this because you'll have to scale up and deploy the AI tool across the organization. The second piece is obviously the risk tiering and context of use. This is the most important one. This will determine the validation depth, oversight, and regulatory engagements. Obviously, the data model and the validation foundations that we looked at, they continue. And then if you have to operate, monitor, and decommission, you will have to look at drift monitoring, change control mechanisms, the human in loop with accountability defined, and you'll have to document the decommissioning whenever the models are retiring. So this is a sequential flow. what most of the pharma deployments have failed where is at the layer two. I mean, they discover the risk tiering or the context of use or the gap during a audit or an inspection or an internal management monitoring. Obviously, after this, uh, so most of the recommendations are otherwise remain advisory. If we don't follow this sequentially, the deployment is not a success. So the next one. Yeah, so I mean, this is just a brief about where all do you see the use cases, if I have to say that, for just a moment. Yeah, so this is where you see a different risk tierings of different types of use cases when you are looking at the R&D function. But hello, yeah, yeah. So can we go to the next one? Yeah, so if you look at so the use case for AI in clinical trial designs, right? So clinical development is where AI will deliver the largest absolute value. So the largest absolute risk. So in development, it can create material value by improving the site selections, patient matching, simulation of design options, and risk-based monitoring is also there. But it also can introduce selection bias. It can identify, I mean, site level data quality issues, and then the black box behavior, which is important, which is the regulators need to understand, I mean, if there are adaptive decisions which have happened during this whole trial process, and the regulators are not able to interpret these decisions very clearly, then it can undermine the trial integrity. So the risk and the benefits are very much there. The mitigation plan, obviously, for the leadership is to pre-specify the context of use using the credibility framework. And obviously, uh, acceptance metrics have to be defined before deployment, and you have to keep the investigators and the sponsor sign-offs on critical actions. You can't leave it to the tool. So the message here is AI does not run the trial. It's AI sharpens the trial team's attention to what matters in the trial. So that's the key thing. And the data governance, obviously, we have the ICH E63, the data sharing agreements, and the the the, the machine learning ops registry as such. So the next one. Yeah, so this is another use case that if you want to look at uh, in drug safety. So ICSR's individual case safety report processing and signal detection. Now, safety is the clearest example of why AI in pharma must be governed as a patient risk system. It's not a productivity system. It's one of the best lighthouse use cases. Operational pain is real. Governance case is equally clear. And AI triage incoming cases, they can detect duplicates, they can support coding, they can improve signal detection at scale. But if it misses a serious case or it creates an unmanageable alert noise or the consequence is immediate. I mean, so the PV AI tools should be treated as a high consequence use case and with the dual review on serious or unlisted events. The KPI monitoring has to be against the regulatory timelines very strictly, and the QPPV owned accountability for any model change. In fact, I mean, safety is one area where you have this accountability very clearly defined as compared to the other areas. But yeah, the human in a loop is something that's super critical when you're looking at drug safety. Can we move to the next slide? So yeah, this is for all who want to look at the generative use case for medical affairs, right? Either through medical information, scientific content, or MSL insights. So this is the place where often the fastest place to create value with GenAI is seen, but it is also a place where the off-label drift hallucinations, and content governance failures have become visible very quickly. This is where every organization wants to move in quickly. It's a low hanging fruit, is what everybody thinks, and they should, but with discipline. The Gen AI can help with literature surveillance. You can draft medical information responses. You can summarize the MSL insights. You can reduce duplication across affiliates, that is, country teams. The boundary condition should be critical, but the system has to be grounded in approved consent from the HCPs, separated from the promotional workflows. This is very common in pharma. The promotional and the non-promotional workflows are completely separate. It's a firewall. And obviously, it has to be routed through the medical legal review for all the messaging which goes out where appropriate. Obviously, the safest deployment pattern is using retrieval augmented generation over approved content, and with every output traceable to sources, model version, and review. So, I mean, there are systems in place in pharma which do it, and AI can easily fit into this workflow very quickly as long as the governance structure is maintained. Can we go to the next one? So because of the time, I will move this, but these are the examples where you can use AI in the GXP in terms of demand forecasting or cold chain supply chain, or in terms of batch releases. Can we move ahead? Can we move? Yeah. So the message is pretty clear. I mean, yeah. So this is one framework across every use case. I mean, this is the slide which shows you how to convert an AI strategy into an enterprise operating reality. Every use case that you might develop should be governed through the same six domains of accountability, data foundation, model lifecycle, validation, human oversight, and third party risk. If one of the six is missing, the AI system will still work, but it will not scale safely, or it will not survive audit pressure for sure. So I would say use this as a checklist to for your internal readiness reviews. It's so governance honestly is not a one-time meeting. It's a the whole six-part management system covering all these things is really an enabler, so that if you put in these checks and balances early, the downstream activities, whether it's medical or commercial or trials, move very smoothly. The next one. So, I mean, if you now want to map where you stand in terms of the AI maturity, use this four-stage approach. In terms, every many companies do describe their maturity in terms of how much AI they use. I would define it a bit differently. I would say true maturity would mean that your governance, validation rigor, monitoring discipline, and regulatory engagement, they scale as you move from exploration to production. It's not about how many AI tools you want to bring in. It's about how consistently is your governance framework growing alongside the scalability of the AI systems in your system. So the first one is the stage one, which is about policy and literacy. The stage two is controlled proof with credibility plans, that you have the seven stage process. Stage three is the scaled GXP deployment. And then you have the KPI monitorings with the quality systems. And stage four is when AI becomes a part of the operating fabric, only because the control fabric is already strong. So you have to diagnose where your organization actually sits before you set a target. So most large pharma are between stage one and two. Lots of productive Gen AI in exploration, small number of GXP pilots. Productivity or the non-GXP use cases are more. Uh, the If you look at this slide, you should be able to use the slide to anchor your roadmap for your organization and also have a budget conversation, right? In terms of if you want to scale across from an exploration to a AI first operating system, then what's the budget that you're looking at? So if I have to say, there was a recent article and a LinkedIn post, if I have to say that, where someone did mention about Novartis as an example. And I mean, every company is building up the AI at an organizational level, and they are at different stages. But Novartis is someone, as a company, they have decided to change what they want to be. So they are now a pharma, healthcare, and a data science company. They're very clear that data is the moat, the strategic moat, and AI will bring in the benefits that they want to see for their organization. And obviously, the whole internal structure has changed. The whole operating system has changed at a organizational level. It's not now anymore one system, one function. Everything is changed so that the AI can be help embedded very quickly across the whole organization. Yeah, next one. Yeah, so one more question sometimes comes in. How does this framework change when you're looking for, say, India, Japan, China, Singapore, or Australia? I mean, the global framework can always be common, but the deployment, the privacy controls, the hosting choices, and then the regulatory engagement, they all have to be localized across the APAC region. Why does this matter? Because many organizations make that mistake of assuming that a global AI governance policy will automatically translate into operational readiness in the APAC region. It does not. I mean, India, Japan, China, Singapore, Australia, they differ on the data residency, AI specific pathways, document expectations, and then the post market control. So, my recommendation is always a hub and spoke model, one global control framework, but local evidence plans, local privacy controls, local regulatory interpretation where that's required. So, next one. Yeah, so this is something that everybody would want to look at, right? So if I am a startup and I'm building something which will be a GXP grade workflow app, what do I do? And for a pharma buyer, I mean, what do they verify before uh, getting the AI tool or before buying the AI tool? I mean, the quality management system. So for the startup, obviously the quality management systems and the software development life cycle, I mean, they have to be aligned to the ISO standards, ISO 13485 and the documented SDLC. So you have to map every release to the risk-based validation process defined in GAM. For the pharma, you have to request these certificates, the QMS certificates, the SOPs, and the sample development, DQ, IQ, OQP, QPAC, and then the Appendix T11, which is applied if the models are in scope. If it's about the data integrity and the audit trail, obviously Alcoa by design, you will have to plan for it. The audit logs have to be immutable. And then 21 CFR Part 11, e-records, e-signatures, time sync, server clocks, and role-based access. The data integrity for the pharma buyer is to trigger a test transaction and see the audit trail. You have to confirm tamper evident hashing, and then the retention policy has to match the contract. About the architecture and validation, obviously, I guess the change control environments in terms of development, validation of production, and then uh, you'll have to have an automated regression validation test packs. And for the pharma buyer, they will have to review these diagrams, the change control records for at least the 6 months, and then the regression suit. Security SOC Type 2 or ISO 27001. While for the pharma, you have to obtain the latest attestation reports and the pen test summaries. Uh, so the message is pretty clear here. I mean, GXP readiness has to be built in right from day one. It can't be bolted on. The startup that designs the validation, the audit trail, the supplier obligations into the version one will win the enterprise contracts. The buyer that verifies them avoids inheriting the risk. The next one. So yes. So what's the call to action? In the next 90 days, you will have to make these 5 moves. I would encourage the leadership teams not to confuse urgency with sprawl. In the first 90 days, the goal is to build a management spine, stand up with an AI council, which includes medical, regulatory, quality, IT, legal, and privacy. And then there has to be single accountable executive sponsor. Obviously, the second step will be to endorse the risk steering matrix of the single classification for all AI use cases and build a risk tiered AI inventory. If you're already having some AIs, revalidate the risk tiers as a company-wide standard. Obviously, then pick up one GXP and one non-GXP use case just to prove the governance. It's not about ROI, it's about how we can scale up the governance. And then you will also have to codify the playbook through SOPs, uh, the MLR reviews, the incident response rate rules. And the most important thing is you will have to invest in people, not just platforms, because AI literacy is a must if you're deploying AI across the organization at scale, across all functions who get impacted when they are using a new workflow based on the AI tool. So you need to create these ethics and bias champions also in every function so that the scale up is sustainable in the long run. Next one. Yeah, so the bottom line from today's discussion for me is, and what I can give as a takeaway is, it's not a technology. AI in pharma is not a technology decision. It's a patient safety, regulatory, and a reputational decision. So the next 5 years, you will win if you build the AI systems your regulators will trust, your medics will defend, your patients will benefit by design, not by exception. Thank you so much for a patient hearing, and we can take some questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abhay sir. We will take a Q&A now. Just 1 minute. Okay, one question from Praveen. Like he want to ask, like, what trends do you expect to see in AI adoption across the pharma industry over the next 2 or 3 years? 2 to 3 years.
Oh, okay. So as I said, I guess, right? So each of the companies, the large pharma, if you're looking at it, uh, first of all, I guess the AI adoption rates will be very significant. What's happening across pharma is initially it all started off in the early discovery and R&D phase. But once the AI tools have proven their value there and the maturity is now AI, the leadership also understands the use cases as well as the benefits that come in through AI. The adoption rates are going to go up significantly. They are, in fact, actually. So if you look at all the large pharmacy, a Novartis, a Sanofi, a BMS, they are deploying a GSK, they are deploying AI across the organizations very broadly. So yes, and it will only increase. Uh, and for the mid tier of the small pharma, they still need to get in. I mean, the scale will determine which AIs will come in, and also they once they realize that AI is going to be the competitive mode. So as the Novartis CEO said, right? So we want to become a data science company. So
Yeah.
once that realization is trickling in, everybody is rushing in for AI. But that's where the biggest risk, right? So if you rush in with just a tool in a GXP environment, you fail because you
Yeah.
if you don't have those governance structures set up, you will not be able to scale successfully at an organization level.
Yes. One more question is there from Raju. He's asking like for a startup, what are some of the AI related risks and regulations one need to keep in mind when deploying digital health products for pharma markets?
Yeah, so I'll go back to, I mean, the first question, right? Uh, Maybe if you can show the slide on the 7 steps, right? The FDA rules.
One second. Yeah.
Yeah, the next one. Yeah. So even before, so this is the, just go back.
Yeah. Is this visible?
Uh, no, not this one. The 7 step one, right? The credibility. Yeah, this one. Yeah, yeah. So so for a startup, even if you want to start something, so this is the guidance, right? So you have the EMA, the DCGI rules are there, and the FDA draft guidance has also come in. Now it's pretty clear the bar is raised. So before even starting developing a tool, you need to also ask these questions very clearly. What is the question of interest? What specific decision does this AI support? What's the context of use very specifically? It has to be a very narrow context of use. It and then the model risk. What's the risk that I'm the that this model brings in? The risk tiering becomes super critical. Without those things in mind, bringing an AI tool is not going to be successful. Uh, because this is what the regulators are asking. Now, if you want to build in a tool which helps improve operational uh, metrics, not in a GXP setting, the requirements are less. But but if you want to build in something for a GXP environment, then it's better that we do this. And also, I mean, it depends on which market you're going to launch the product, right? So you also need to ideally, the best way to do it is FDA has these options of reaching out for advice. The EMA has it, the UK has it, DCJ is also having it now. So you reach out so that they will at least give you an idea whether this, uh, uh, how do I say it? So this is, it's not just a digital health tool, but I mean, there is also a risk tiering involved in this. And what kind of data would really help them approve this tool in a GXP framework? So having those conversations with regulators, answering those questions to your organization, which is developing it very specifically. I think that's the first step for anyone, any startup which is going to build a tool around this. And the regulations are there now. If you look at
Yeah.
the FDA guidance or the EMA or the DCGI guidance, so they're all aligned. Even ICH, which governs the clinical trials and the evidence generation piece, even that is now incorporated. The R3 version, the recent update incorporates all these requirements uh, for an AI tool.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question, or
Yeah.
I mean, is it
I think
something else?
I think he got the answer. Like, okay. So anyone want to ask? They can drop in the Q&A section. Okay, Rajiv want to ask one another question like, is there any equivalent framework for India that factors in DPDP?
For AI?
Yeah, he is asking for specifically for India.
So for India, okay, so for India, I guess the digital thing is there. So we have the digital framework now. The Ayushman Bharat digital framework is there, and the DPDP is basically for the privacy. So it regulates the privacy by explicitly asking for appropriate consents before using the data. Now, if you're looking at a GXP environment, yeah, I mean, the ICH GCP is something which is very common for clinical trials. So all the ICH guidelines, whether it's for manufacturing, quality, clinical trials, or safety, the DCGI or the CDSCO, which is the regulator in India, they have adopted it, and the guidelines are more or less similar. I mean, in terms of the principles and the language. So they're all there available on the website. And I mean, it depends on what you want to look at. Now, whether for an AI tool, uh, very specifically, it's still not yet available on the website. But what I understand is, I mean, it will be more or less now that Ayushman Bharat a framework is there. I mean, it's more or less it will be on the similar lines as EU and US FDA. So the bar is rising, the entry barriers are going to be high, and especially for those which are, I mean, in the GXP. So if you're building something for an operational workflow or for healthcare per se, that I mean, it, as I said, I mean, there are some commonalities and there are some differences. That's still a bit lower in terms of the risk barrier or the bar which is set up. But for pharma, I mean, the bar is going to be high. And the DCGI website, I mean, the CDSCO website usually gives all the guidances. We still don't have anything for AI. I'm expecting something to happen soon.
Okay, okay. I think he got the answer. So I think we can conclude this webinar like we are short with the time. So anyone having any questions, they can email. I will share the email ID of Abhay sir. Okay, thanks for joining this webinar. Thank you, Abhay sir, for
Yeah,
giving these insights.
thank you. Thank you so much, Dinesh. It was a great pleasure to be here. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to have a discussion.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks all. Thank you.
Have a great weekend ahead.
Same.